Just to introduce this very special panel, I hold this one near and dear to my heart. This was sort of a brainchild of Iva's and mine last year in Chicago. We were speaking and just so excited about the sessions last year and how special they were, and hearing from parents and their stories, and rightfully so. There was so much focus on moms of cleft-affected children and what a unique journey that they go through. And we felt that it was really important to also highlight the dad's perspective, the dad's stories. I know I didn't really know my dad's experience until I spoke with him specifically and was like, what was your perspective? What was your experience like? And I really had to notice that I didn't ask right away. A lot of the focus was on my mom and on myself and on my sister, who's also cleft-affected, by the way. So I'm just so grateful to have these gentlemen here to share their stories. And let's just dive right in. So Eric, we'll start with you. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell us about that moment that you found out your child had a cleft, and how did you feel in that moment?
Sure, thank you so much. So my name is Eric Bates. I have two daughters. Both are cleft-affected. My oldest is Olivia. She's 4 years old now. She had unilateral cleft lip. My youngest is Chloe. She's a year and a half now, and she had unilateral cleft lip and palate. They are the joy of my heart. You know, thinking about what Jeremy was talking about a little earlier, and Susie as well. You know, just I grew up in sports, and I always wanted to have a boy as a dad, and to have the experience of having girls is just so great when you look at them. To imagine the world through their eyes and see them looking back at you, just hoping to be really like worthy of being their dad. So it's really a journey that I've embraced totally. I've always wanted to be a dad, and when I found out that my oldest had a cleft, I was just shocked. It's not in our family. There's no family history. It was not something we were expecting. And then when we were going through our second pregnancy, finding that out for Chloe, it was just another shock. It just, what was going to come, what was expected, what's going to happen next, not knowing where to turn. So there was this real anxiety, just not knowing where to turn, basically. So I'll leave it there for now.
Sure. Zeb, would you like to share your perspective, a little background?
Sure. My name is Zeb Carabello, and I'm 44 years old. I was born with a unilateral cleft lip and palate, and now I have an 11-year-old son, Luca, who was born with a bilateral cleft lip and palate. And so I've had kind of a longer journey with it, and have navigated both growing up with a cleft and then being a father of a son with a cleft. And so I have some photos where I thought that might kind of be helpful to show my journey. So I have kind of like a caption on there. But grew up in the 1980s, 1990s. You can tell with some of the style there, I think, of the fashion on the PowerPoints. And so on the right-hand side there is my son, Luca, shortly after he was born with his, bilateral cleft lip and palate. And I had a lot more hair then. We've got a reverse hairstyle, I'm realizing now. We're like the inverse of that picture. So yeah, he was born in 2012. And this is age 10, actually. Now he's 11. But that's Luca right now. He's an amazing kid. Actually reminds me a lot of Henry. Henry, great job up there. You were awesome. Well done. and everything I could ask for in the son. This is, I help coach his baseball team. He's very much into sports as well. And so I think I think the balance I've tried to find is recognizing that I have my own journey growing up with a cleft, and that we obviously will have a lot of overlap in his journey, but his journey is also his journey, and it's not mine. It's very different. I think everyone in this room who has a cleft, we all have so many things in common, right? And you're my brothers and my sisters, I always say that. But also our experiences are uniquely our own as well, right? And so I think the same is true for dads and moms of kids with clefts, you know, so much overlap, but also every story is unique, going back to the theme of today, I think. Yeah, so just trying to find that balance. My son he starts middle school next year, so that's like the current chapter of our cleft parent journey. And yeah, just hope to kind of hear some questions that you all have and learn from my other panelists up here.
Thank you, Zeb. Jeremy, we heard from you already as one of our keynote speakers, but if there's anything else you'd like to share, just sort of refresh our memories from 20 minutes ago, you're welcome to do that.
The thing that I remember is the day that Henry was born. What I didn't understand, my wife had a C-section that was a requirement, the doctor, because of Henry's cleft. What I didn't understand was that the post-C-section, she was out for the count for a number of days because that's a difficult, huge procedure, which they would not let me watch. I'm glad they didn't. But I remember at that time, they didn't do skin to skin. They sent Henry to the nursery, and I went with him. And because of a weird schedule snafu, neither of our parents could be there, so it was just us. And a friend of ours was scheduled moments after Liz, and her family was all there. So I remember feeling very strange. I was in the NICU with Henry, you know, with his cleft, and the nurse said, "Put your hand on him." So I did. And I remember watching his family my friend's family looking in through the window at their baby, and it was just me and Henry in that room, and I thought, we're gonna be all right. We got each other. And then I remember them instructing me how to feed him because Liz was asleep, recovering. And boy, I didn't know what to do. But they talked me through it. They tried to get Henry to latch, but he couldn't. If I might say, the lactation consultant was a little insistent on him being able to latch, even though he just couldn't. So we had to, we had a special bottle, and I had to learn how to do it. I had to change his diaper, put it on backwards. So I just remember as a very much deer in headlights experience for me. But I'm grateful for that day. That's what I think about.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. It's such a unique experience, talking about that time in the hospital right after your child is born. Like I said at the beginning of the session, so much attention is usually placed on the mother and the child and, where's dad? How's he feeling? Who's taking care of him? What's going through his mind? I'm going off the cards a little bit because I'm just so interested in hearing that perspective from both Eric and Zeb, if you want to tag on to that. Eric, you want to go first? Zeb, whatever you like.
Well, I'll just piggyback there, too. I mean, we actually, my wife, Megan, is here. Hi, Megan. Round of applause. So we actually had a very similar experience at the hospital in Denver when my son was born with cleft palate. And, you figure you're in a large city, and this is a hospital that, slogan is like, we're the baby place or whatever. So they have a lot of babies born there, but we had a lactation consultant say, yeah, he can breastfeed, and we had the background, and he had, again, like a deep, severe cleft palate, and we're like, no, I don't think so. So, after a week and things settled down, we were able to reach out to the hospital and talk about educating the staff a little more And so, like, right away, again, like, growing up with the cleft, I had background in a lot of this stuff, but I think about people who didn't or who don't, who, like, you might not have known what a cleft was until 2 months ago, right, your ultrasound or whatever. And so I think, like, right away I was like, okay, like, this is starting quickly. Let's educate, let's be proactive, and let's push. You know, that was kind of my first dad experience, I guess, of having a son with the cleft. Was kind of the full-on, like, proactive, let's educate, let's get the information out there. And I was disappointed that, you know, 2012, 1 out of every 700 births, that wasn't common knowledge, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I agree. My wife and I are actually both registered nurses by trade, and to be in the hospital on the other side of things just is a whole other experience. And you know, I think to see, like they mentioned, there's just the lack of knowledge out there, really. It's in our communities, it's in our hospitals, and you know, one of the reasons why I've gotten so involved is to help raise that awareness as well, because you know, we had a game plan going in, because you know, obviously we found out about this before the birth. Obviously, there's people who would find out about this after and really have no idea what's ahead. So we had some plans, you know. I was going to the NICU if our children were going to the NICU, and she was going to recover and do those things. So I think just being there and being with her and going through it with her, pre-planning, and really we took it on together. So it was interesting, but just to see the lack of awareness from some of the healthcare people, and being a healthcare person was just tough to see. Yeah,
for sure. So it sounds like you all have a really strong, supportive partnership. What were some challenges that you faced together, or maybe that you found on your own as dads, and how did you navigate those together?
So I think a lot of our experience, both our children had the nasoalveolar molding devices. So a lot of, you know, people would see the stroller coming down the street and, oh, baby, you know, let's look in and see. And then they see the device and it's just a shock. And they don't expect what they see. So we were just very upfront and open and just tried to just bring people into it with us. And that made some people uncomfortable, but I think it also made some people very comfortable to just be able, you know, okay, we can talk about it, we can ask questions, like, it's okay. So I think that was one of the ways that, even with our family, you know, we had to bring them in, really pull them in, get them involved, so they didn't feel a certain way. And we wanted to just have them have that experience as being grandparents, aunts, uncles.
Yeah. Zeb, do you want to talk a little bit about your experience, your partnership, how you faced certain challenges together?
Yeah, I mean, again, you know, like, I had a little idea what to expect, obviously, like, going through it myself growing up. But yeah, I mean, I think, you know, my side of the family very much knew about clefts and was aware. Megan's somewhat, you know, but there was some educating there as well. Our son Luca also had the NAM, and so that was new and different. And those appointments were actually great in the lobby because we met a lot of other parents of babies, obviously, who had the clefts, so that was a good little network built in as well. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, early on, it was really just, there were, you know, some, might have been family members, friends, or strangers who, it was all about educating, right? Yeah, this is why the tape's on here. This is why his lip is not fully formed or their nose looks like that. And so just kind of, again, I don't know, it was kind of a whirlwind those first, that first year probably, you know, not a lot of sleep, etc. So I don't remember it probably as well as I should, basically. But yeah, I think, again, like my big thing was just like, let's educate. I think the whatever 20 whatever years from when I was growing up with the clefts, when my son was born, I had this assumption that there have been all these advances in medicine and technology, and there were some, for sure, but also not, it did not progress as much as I had assumed. And especially like the social and societal aspect of it, like still being shocked that not more people knew about it, you know?
Yeah. Jeremy, do you want to?
I would like to be the third person in a row to talk about the NAM.
Let's hear it for the NAM.
I spoke to several people last night at the lovely dinner who extolled the virtues of the NAM. It was very helpful to them. So I would like to say that I understand its utility. I hate it. I hate the NAM. I remember it's this thing you stick on the roof of their mouth. There's rubber bands, there's tape. The tape irritated. He was allergic to the tape. And every time we put it on, he screamed bloody murder, and it made me resent it because we were giving him pain and discomfort. I understand its usefulness, but I have very mixed feelings about it. And bizarrely, a few years into Henry's life, we were at the doctor, and a nurse there, I think, came up to me because she had heard about Henry, and she said, "I invented the NAM." And I didn't know what to say to her. So thank you. But that was tough. That was tough. NAM was tough.
Yeah. I didn't know what a NAM was until I became more involved with Smile Train. I don't think that was a thing when I was born in 1987. No, pretty much not. Right?
Right. 25, yeah, 30 years old.
Oh yeah, that was not a thing. So, you know, I'm hearing that challenge and acknowledging it and holding space for that, but that's not something that I'm familiar with, not that I would necessarily remember in a conscious way, but like you said in your presentation, Jeremy, you know, there's so much that your child absorbs self-consciously, and it's just such an interesting journey. I heard each of you sort of speak a little bit about one of your greatest challenges was sort of navigating outsiders' reactions. Did you ever feel any sort of explanation fatigue, and how did you push through that, and maybe how did you and your partner help each other through, or anything you'd like to say on that front? Eric, you want to start?
Sure, yeah. I think even myself, you know, when I first heard that our daughters would have cleft, I went to those places of misconception of, because that's all I knew, right? You know, it's fixable, it's no problem, right? Not understanding the journey that you know, our daughters would go through, that we would go through, that our family would go through, and that it really is a lifelong thing. And, you know, we're stronger for it, certainly, but as far as explanation fatigue, yeah, even now, you know, some people I feel only want to see pictures of the girls to see, you know, oh, can you see a scar? Can you see, how does their nose look? Things like that. And that's getting a little old, especially when, you know, these are some friends and things like that. So, you know, that's a lot of it. But we brought people in, and we just explained it for them, so they wouldn't have to think a lot of the times.
Yeah. Zeb, do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I'll touch on the idea that there's kind of an idea out there sometimes that, well, You got the lip repair surgery, you got the palate repair surgery. Well, your kid's fixed, right? Even like a smile train, right? Like that's some of the messaging out there. And I've been on a panel or two with Smile Train, and I kind of brought that up. And props to Smile Train, because I feel like the Smile Train's been much better in the last few years, in particular with kind of their messaging around that. But really growing up and being through it, being like, well, no, it's like, yes, they have the surgery, they have the repair, right? But it's a journey, right? Like, I mean, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And I want to make sure that dads, moms, and the kids are all prepared for that.
Yeah. Jeremy?
Yes, I do remember explanation fatigue. My biggest thing to learn was that the lip was repaired early, and the palate is still requiring attention. So I didn't quite understand the difference in the difficulty between the two of them. I would say as far as outsiders asking questions and so forth, we've had a fairly supportive network of friends. There have been a few instances where some strangers didn't quite understand what was going on, or made some denigrating comments about Henry. But that was very rare, few and far between, I have to say, by and large. And his friends have been very supportive. He just had a few come here just to hear him. So I think certainly, and I was speaking with Suzanne last night, I think the tenor has changed quite likely because of Smile Train's work. The climate has changed around it.
Yeah. It's making me think, you're mentioning your child's experience with friends and their peers and things like that. As dads, that sort of protective instinct, what are your feelings around or tools that you've found that are helpful in sort of like letting go and being supportive of your child when they're out on their own and maybe having these experiences, maybe undesirable experiences and interactions with kids of their own age, or maybe even an adult who approaches them and says something weird. I know that happened to me as a kid. I had a bizarre experience in a grocery store. My mom and I were at the checkout counter, and the lady looked at me, and she went, oh no, what happened? Did mommy hit you? And I was just like so beyond shocked.
Weird thing to go to violence right away.
Right. I was just so beyond shocked, and I actually got upset because, I look up at my mom and she's just flabbergasted and like, how do you jump to that first, right? So my instinct was like to protect my mom, and I was like, no way. I was like, no way. So, but we can't always be there in those moments. I say we, like I'm a parent, but I have like a mama bear nature. So how have you navigated those feelings for yourself, or if your child has come to you with those experiences, how do you sort of guide them through? Let's work backwards. Jeremy, do you want to start?
The one incident that I remember, Henry was a toddler, and as you can probably gather, he's very outgoing, gregarious, and he wanted to play with some older kids at the playground, and they decided he looked and sounded funny because at that time he hadn't had speech, and he spoke with the back of his mouth, a lot of the glottal stops and so forth. And they ran away from him and they made fun of him. I'm not sure if I ever talked to you about this. I wanted to punch those kids. I was so full of anger. Henry didn't know. He didn't understand. He was just like, hey, come back, play. So I took him out of that situation and I told Liz about my violent thoughts. And what Liz helped at home was to normalize discussing the cleft. Just make it an average, normal part of our conversation. Henry is very happy to talk about it, and what I've observed with his friends, therefore, he is happy to explain what's going on, and the kids, when they know that it's normal, they're fine. They're totally cool. I'm sure there are a couple of people at school who say things, but by and large, Henry's got a very large network of friends. As mentioned in the speech, he was nominated for vice president so he's beloved at his school. So.
Yeah. Zeb, do you want to share anything around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think there's multiple approaches, and I think from a parent's point of view, understanding that Henry might have one day of the week where someone says something and he's like, I'm going to educate you. Let me tell you, 1 out of every 700 kids, and he has his bullet points, right? And there might be the next day where Henry's like, I'm just walking away. Like, I don't have it in me today, right? And so I think really understanding that there's no one-size-fits-all answer to comments. Like say 95% of comments from people are they do want to learn more, or they're really just curious and maybe it doesn't come out how they want it to, right? I'd say it's a very small percent who are actually being trying to be rude, And then the other thing I've talked to my son about is again, he's going into middle school, right? And I know my experience, I figured this out. I told myself this at one point, but having a cleft is very, very personal. But at the same time, kids are going to find something to clown on everyone about, right? It doesn't matter if you're gonna be the next top model in America or whatever. They're gonna make fun of that mole you have right here. And so in a way, they're gonna pick on something. They're just gonna pick on your cleft. In a way, it's not personal. I remember telling myself that and made myself feel a lot better because of that, and I do think it's true as well. So I mean, again, just realize it's a journey, and I always speak at this camp we have at Children's Hospital, Colorado, for kids with clefts. And my main message is, the older you get, the easier it gets in general, right? And so just also knowing that, I mean, you saw how awesome Henry was up here, for an 11-year-old, and he wouldn't be that awesome if he didn't have a cleft, that's the fact behind it. And so, hey, there's a lot of great things that come with it, and there will come a point in your kid's life where they will be thankful they had a cleft, right? But I don't know what age that's going to be. For me, it was later than it should have been, but that point will come.
Yeah. Eric, I know your kids are both still pretty young. Have they been out on their own, sort of flying solo, dealing with any of these experiences, or are you just sort of bracing yourself to be ready?
Yeah, things are a little more innocent with their interactions at this stage, but they still get questions. Oh, how come you have your tooth is crooked or something like that, right? Or even one of Olivia's teachers was like, oh, she already lost a tooth. So it's just little things like that you kind of pick up on over time. Any of the teasing or bullying or any of that thankfully has not happened yet for them. But we're just preparing them. Being honest with them, and the fact that they both have it is unique. Where they have each other, but also we can talk to them a little bit differently about that as well. So that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. I had a similar experience to your children. My older sister was also born with cleft. So unlike a lot of kids, I actually was able to see someone every day who looked like me. And that's not always the case. Each of you have a completely different experience within your household. I mean, Zeb, you had your own personal experience of being born with cleft, so your son sort of had you to look up to and see sort of mirrored his experience. You have 2 daughters who were both born cleft-affected. Jeremy, you're in a household with 1 cleft-affected child. How do you think that sort of shaped each of your experiences? Do you feel like maybe that's aided you in some way in guiding your child on their journey? And or what do you do to help support them to see themselves mirrored, normalize their experience, help them feel less alone or othered if they are feeling that way. Eric, do you want to?
Sure. I don't know if Zeb kind of mentioned this a little earlier. Just letting them be kids. You know, I think that's letting them live their life, letting them sing, letting them play, encouraging that, right? Encouraging the things that they can do, just like you would build on their strengths and help them see their opportunities to see where they can get better. I think that happens at all ages, and I think that's kind of one of the things that we've been focused on is just, you know, seeing that they may have something that is not like everybody else, but that doesn't make it a bad thing or anything that's negative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would say, like, keeping, you know, the focus on Cleft Dads. How many dads are in the room? Can you raise your hand if you're a dad of a kid with a cleft? All right, like,
Nice.
I mean, just like, you know, when I grew up, 80s, 90s, it was very much like, I mean, I love my dad, he's great, but we didn't talk about it, you know? That's just how it was. And so, like, I really encourage you to talk about it with your sons, your daughters, and I do, and then, you know, some days Luca wants to talk, and not every day I don't talk about it, right? Let me be clear. But here and there, and some days he wants to talk about it, and even when he doesn't, I just want him to hear me, you know what I mean? And he can be annoyed with me, and that's cool, right? And he is a lot. But I've reminded myself, like, don't let it go too long without recognizing, like, hey, you good? What's going on? Talk to me, right? And most of the time, he's like, shut up, Dad. I want to go shoot oops or whatever. And but he heard me, right? And he knows it's on my mind. So that's been my approach to it because that's not what I had growing up.
Yeah.
The thing that I have started doing is, well, I wrote the episode. I'm trying to now on the material that I'm writing include kids with clefts, people with clefts, put facial difference out there in a positive light. You know, I have an appetite to write all sorts of things, not just preschool. And certainly Henry's existence in my life has made me aware of the prevalence of scars, usually glommed onto villains in TV and movies. And I stopped short of saying that they can't do that, but I do believe that scars don't need to connote villainy all the time. And let's have some main characters, let's have some fun side characters with facial difference, and let that be an indication that they are stronger as opposed to wounded in some way. And that's what I would like to see, and that's inspired by Henry.
Thank you for helping lead the charge with that change. It's incredibly meaningful, you know, as a cleft-affected now adult, but being a kid at one point. You're right. You know, children a lot of times look to the media of what is presented to us and try to see ourselves in those things, those cartoons. It's so important to have someone to look up to, even if it's a cartoon, you know, have your experience mirrored and presented back at you and sort of place yourself in that, learning empathy, right? You're not bad because you're different. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, let's talk about joy. Please. Can we share a particularly joyful moment that just stands out for you? I just leave it at that. Share some joy, please, Eric.
Sure. Yeah, so I think just being a dad is the coolest thing. So every day I find joy in something that, you know, my girls do, celebrate those accomplishments and things like that. You know, selfishly, the thing that brought me the most joy was that first time where, you know, they say dad. And for my youngest with the palate and the speech issues, that didn't come right away. It didn't come as early. And she wanted to say it. You could tell she could say it. But that made me really want to fight for her and fight for everybody else, to say that, like, you know, I wanted to hear that so bad. So when she finally said that to me, that was like one of the best things ever. And then just really again, just being a dad in general. But that was the one that hit home.
Yeah.
I'll talk about my son Luca. We had a conference with his teacher last year, 5th grade. This was last year at elementary school. And he's very much a leader. And we've talked to him about that. But his one teacher just told us, like, pulled us aside and said, hey, I want to let you know Luca is, like, always standing up for other kids. He's very loud, like he doesn't shut up, frankly. But like he uses his voice and his nonstop talking to really advocate for other kids. She told us a couple stories of how kids were being picked on, etc., and he like stood up for them and stuff. And again, like just made me think that you know his you know what he's been through in his trials and some more things he'll go through. You know, and I think Jeremy just mentioned it, but the scars should be celebrated, you know? I mean, like, it's a symbol of strength, you know? And I think that definitely represented that to me, having those conversations. So, yeah, I find joy in that for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Would like to add, I have a son who has just finished 5th grade who stands up for kids.
Yes.
I'm also 44. The joyful moment that I think of is in Henry's climax of his 5th grade, the school hosts a musical review where all the kids get to sing and dance, and the 5th graders are allowed to perform solo if they get, you know, if they win the audition. And Henry auditioned with an Into the Woods song, "There are big, tall, terrible giants in the sky," and he got it. And he performed solo up there, and he just commanded the stage. He practiced so hard. He rehearsed it. He's got a wonderful singing voice. He gets that from his mom, not from me. And he really just nailed it. And I remember being in the audience and watching that, and I was so proud and thinking about his journey leading up to that moment. And that was joyful for me.
Yeah. I think sort of fitting is to close out the session before we open it up to some Q&A. Any words of wisdom or advice? I know we touched on that a little bit earlier, maybe for some dads in the room, or anything maybe that has come up for you today. For a father who has maybe just found out that their child is to be born with a cleft, or maybe they didn't know beforehand, what would you like to share with that dad?
I think the biggest moment for me was really when we found out we had the cleft, and we were contacting programs, and I see, you know, Shelly Cohen's back there actually. We had our first conversation with her, and the first thing she said to us was, "Congratulations on your pregnancy." And that really set the tone for my wife and I to say, okay, like, things are gonna be okay. And don't try to rush to fix things and have that dad instinct to just go and do it. Enjoy the journey, support your significant other, and just take it day by day and take it in stride.
Thank you. Zeb?
I mean, that was great. It was ditto what Eric said.
What he said.
Yeah, really. And just the idea, because felt like you were talking to me there. Don't try to fix it right away, right? It is a journey. It's a marathon, and there's lows and there's highs, but in the end, the highs way outnumber the lows. And your kid's going to be awesome beyond what you thought as they grow.
Well said, both of you. I'd like to echo my fellow 44-year-old's comments as well. I just had a birthday. I'm trying to normalize.
This is a safe space.
It's a safe space. Don't protect them too much. Your child will be fine. They will be wonderful. They're going to have a great experience. Don't protect them too much. They will surprise you with their resilience. The experience will strengthen them ultimately. And follow their lead when it comes to how they live their life. You still get to be a parent, but you don't need to shield them. They're going to be great.